And I don't care if I sound like a hater. I am a hater. Okay. If Lauren Sanchez Bezos has no haters, I'm dead. Hello and welcome to Queen Things, a show where we talk about the things that matter to us queens, because if it matters to us, it matters. I'm KJ Miller. I'm a founder, a lecturer, a content creator, and I'm your host. And what are we talking about today? Well, first of all, we do need to talk about the Met Gala. The Met Gala was last night. I'm recording this on Tuesday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Last night was the Met Gala, which Beyoncé co-chaired. There was lots of fashion. There were moments, red carpet moments. There were some, why did they wear that moments? There were some moments. I'm referring to Lauren Sanchez Bezos, obviously. And a lot of things in between. So we're going to touch on that. We're going to talk about the era that Beyoncé is currently in, because I do believe she's in her Auntie era. I want to talk a little bit about that. I do want to touch on, Lord help me, the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni final settlement. We are finally out of this muck, this ruck, this suck. It has been an energy suck, not recently, but for a time there. I do want to talk about that. I might touch on Olivia Rodrigo performing at SNL. We might do a judge and jury segment at the end. I mentioned that a while back. You know, a lot of things are going to happen right after these announcements. And I have exactly one announcement today, and that is, yes, this is a new wig. I'm back on my Diana Ross. I wanted to go big. I wanted to go curly. I haven't even teased this wig yet. If I were to tease it, this could really be, it could really give you Shaka Khan. Haven't done that yet, but I might. Don't count me out. That really is the announcement, because every time I get a new wig, I feel like I want to tell everybody. I think there are people who approach wig life not the way I do, where they're like, they just, they're wearing wigs like you'd wear your natural hair. They're not trying to announce to everybody that they're wearing a wig. I'm the opposite. And maybe it's because I'm still getting used to it. But I tell everybody, maybe because I'm still feeling weird about it. I don't know. But also, it's so new to me. So the newest thing I've been doing is wearing a wig to work out at my yoga studio. I decided I wanted to do that mostly just to test it out. I've done it the last 3 or so days that I've been. I'm going to do it again tonight. And I want to test out what works and what doesn't work when you want to work out in a wig. I'll tell you, it's a lot of work, way less work just going bald. But I sort of have been wanting to feel it out. So anyway, and I'm telling people, I'm in the locker room like, girl, got a wig on. Like I did it for the first time on Saturday, ran into my homegirl, Lauren. And as soon as I saw her, I said, girl, I'm wearing a wig in class today. And I don't know what's going to happen. It could very well fall off because I sweat a lot in yoga. It's a heated class and it's also a power yoga class. So I'm sweating a lot. So it very well could have fallen off. So far, it has not. It has not fallen off thus far. We'll find out, never say never. I just pray that if it does fall off while I'm doing yoga, everyone just stays very zen, just goes with the flow. We don't make a big scene. We just let it happen. Okay. That's my ask. If any of my fellow yogis from my Short North studio are, listening to this, spread the word. If my wig falls off, let's not mention it. Let's pretend like it's not happening. Okay. And that's our announcement. So let's get to the Met Gala. Here's the thing about me that I think most people do know. I am not a fashionable person, so I often feel ill-equipped to judge fashion because what do I know, right? Like what do I know? Then again, I will say fashion to me is like art in that you don't have to be an art historian or an art expert to appreciate great art, to be taken aback by great art, for art to make you feel something. And similarly, you don't have to be fashionable in order to know good fashion when you see it. Something just clicks for you. And obviously it's subjective. So what one person might consider to be amazing and beautiful, another person might consider to be whack. Sure, but that's something I've had to tell myself, like, you know what, even though I myself am not necessarily fashionable, that doesn't mean I can't appreciate good fashion. So with all of that said, let's get to the fashion. If you're following along on YouTube, I have pulled up a Cosmo article titled "The 20 Best and Worst Dressed Celebs at the 2026 Met Gala." I reviewed this before hopping on here. It did have some of my favorite looks, not all of them, but it did have a few of my favorites. That's mostly what I want to touch on, the people that I enjoyed. And then at the end, I'll circle back and talk about the one outfit I really deeply disliked, mostly because I disliked that person. Okay, so just in case you weren't aware, there was a Costume Institute exhibit that inspired the theme of the evening being costume art. And then the dress code was specifically fashion is art. And so I think what a lot of people took that to mean was they took inspiration from actual art pieces, paintings, sculptures, so on and so forth. And then their outfits were an homage to those pieces. But to me, I feel like that's one interpretation of it that you could have taken. Another one is simply to wear a fashion piece that in and of itself is a work of art, whether because of how it's sculpted, because of the shapes at play, because of the textures at play, but a piece that in and of itself is a work of art, I think is another way you could have interpreted this theme. And so to me, when I heard that, I was very excited because I felt like, oh, this is broad enough that it gives people a lot of room to play, and everyone has the license now to come with something super interesting because it's meant to be art. Art is supposed to make us feel. It is supposed to maybe be unnerving or exciting, interesting, hard to immediately understand. So I was really looking to feel things from the fashion. And some people did that better than others. I had to scroll all the way to the bottom of the article because we are starting with Beyoncé. They put her last because they saved best for last. I'm going to start with her. I found her dress to be so fantastic. It was an Olivia dress that is meant to look basically like a skeleton. There is a skeleton painting that it's paying homage to. And so it's got her ribs, it's got her hip bones, like everything. And then the gloves she wore also look like, bones, everything about it. Then this amazing feather, super long cape and a beautiful crown. The whole thing looked majestic, but also a little bit eerie. I think she really pulled it off. She looked like the queen of the night, which makes sense because she's one of the co-chairs for the Met Gala this year. And it was giving co-chair, it was giving boss. And then also she wasn't the last person on to walk the red carpet. She was almost last, but when she got there, obviously the paparazzi and everyone else, nobody cared about anybody else at that point. So the people who were behind her, sad to say, unfortunately for them, they really kind of got, dusted to the left because it's Beyonce. And to her credit, she tried to come last. She tried to be late. So she knew once I get to these steps, all eyes are going to be on me. Every photographer, every lens, everyone's going to be yelling my name. I'm Beyonce. So she came super late so that she would be the last person. Unfortunately, some of y'all also came super late. See, you thought you were the Beyonce in this situation. No. You're not the Beyonce. Beyonce is the Beyonce. So if you also came late thinking, oh, I'll be the last one up the steps. Now that's poor planning on your part, okay? Because obviously Beyonce was going to come late to the carpet and you should have prepared for that, frankly. So I don't really feel sorry for them. I love that she had so much of the staircase literally to herself. The only other person who dared be on the staircase with her was Blue. Blue also looked fantastic. And I did have the thought, I wonder how Rumi and Sir feel because it feels like Blue is everywhere and Rumi and Sir just be at home, but they'll get their time. But Blue looked immaculate in a really beautiful white dress with a nice little, not cape, but almost poncho, shawl. There's a word for this, I'm sure. But she looked really beautiful. It was so nice. And then Beyonce actually did an interview, an on-carpet interview, which we know she does not do, with Lala Anthony. And she basically said, Lala was like, what are you excited about? How does it feel to be here? And Beyonce made the whole interview about Blue. She was like, it feels surreal because I'm here with Blue. I'm here with my daughter. She looks beautiful. She looks so amazing. She was so ready for this. And then later I saw someone else, another paparazzi asked her a question. And I forget what the question was. It was something like, what inspires you? And she was like, my children. So that brings me to a point I want to make, and I am going to get to the other people, a few other people. But I really genuinely feel like Beyonce is firmly in her auntie era. I said this on social. To me, and what does that mean? What does it mean to be in your auntie era? To me, it means it's not that you are saying your goals and the things you want to do don't matter anymore. They obviously still do. It's that you have moved from being solely self-focused, right? A big part of your world is now like legacy building, which I know she has been doing since the beginning, but legacy building via the generation coming up after you. I think a lot of her focus has transitioned to that. And I think we can see it. We can see it in her tours. We can see how much she is putting Blue at the forefront, but beyond even putting her at the forefront and saying like, you can perform and you can dance, it just feels like her energy really has shifted to that being so much more of her focus. And I actually said it when I saw some videos emerging from a Sacred event that they had done. That's her hair company. She had hosted a hair show. And, after the hair show, she comes out and she's speaking to people. She's doing meet and greets. She's taking photos. And so many of the comments is Beyonce basically just languishing praise on all of these, because it's mostly influencers there, all of these young influencers saying how proud she is of them. I mean, it just felt so maternal. And, she's been a mom now for over 13 years, but I feel like we are really watching her come into a more maternal era. And I like that because it's real. It's authentic and it's nice to see because she also still is at the top of her game. I guess one of the things I love about it is I don't feel like she is sacrificing her art because she's in this auntie era, this maternal era. I feel like these two things are coexisting quite nicely. And it's beautiful to see, as a mom. It's beautiful to see because there are a lot of things that I am attempting to build and get better at, but I also have at any given time a huge portion of my brain and my heart focused on my daughter, focused on the world that I'm leaving behind for her. Like that is just a very real part of my essence and who I am and what I'm thinking about. So it's just very beautiful to see Beyonce really embrace this part of her identity. And let me also just say, I don't feel like a disclaimer should be necessary here, but let me also just say, what I'm not saying is that Beyonce is somehow a higher value person because she's a mom and embracing her maternal identity. That is not what I'm saying. And I want to be very clear about that because there are plenty of women who never, experience motherhood because they don't want to, right? It's not desirable to them. Or for other reasons, maybe because they're not able to, but that most certainly does not make anyone less valuable or their journey less valuable, or make them someone that I can learn less from. This is just one aspect that I do have in common with Beyonce. And it is inspiring to me, but I do just want to make that clear because sometimes people like to conflate that. Like if someone compliments a mom on admirable mothering, other people take that and conflate that with them saying you're better because you're a mom. And that's not what I'm saying. And I don't think that disclaimer should be necessary, but just wanted to add it in. Okay, let's get back to the fashion. Up next, I want to talk about Janelle Monáe and Christian Siriano. She is wearing a dress that is like metallic, technological, but also with greenery involved, spark plugs, cords. There's a lot going on here. I have to tell you, I love it. It feels very Janelle Monáe, but it also feels on theme because I feel like I'm looking at an art piece. I feel like my eye is trying to figure out what is it that I'm looking at? What does it mean? Does it mean something hopeful? Does it mean something sinister? I'll note in this Cosmo article, they don't like it. They say this is exactly the kind of look that is most expected for the Met Gala red carpet, and it's certainly dramatic, unique, and statement making in a way that feels exactly right for her. But we just can't bring ourselves to say that it looks good. And you know what? That's weird to me because I think objectively she looks fantastic. But also, is the goal to quote unquote look good, or is the goal to look interesting? You know, like art isn't just meant to be pretty. Oh, that's a pretty painting. Okay. There are plenty of amazing paintings out there that, in fact, are not pretty. I would argue the Mona Lisa isn't pretty at all, but it's interesting, right? So if fashion is art, to me, this is an art piece. I love it. I don't know what Cosmo is talking about. I'll contrast that with Anne Hathaway. First of all, Anne Hathaway looks gorgeous, and these Cosmo writers love her look. This look to me feels she's wearing a really nice black ball gown with some nice, white detail. It feels reminiscent of like a sculpture, architecture sort of thing. But does it feel interesting? I don't know. It's Anne Hathaway. I really like Anne Hathaway. So I think she looks, again, fantastic. But to me, is that the only goal, to look good? No, I think it's to be interesting. I think it's to be thought provoking. I think the best art is. And so for me, this look, while gorgeous, falls a little bit flat in terms of my expectations, but here they love it. They say this is stunning and it perfectly plays into her looks and her ability to work just about any kind of garment up to the highest difficulty setting. Now, I don't know what makes this a highest difficulty setting. It looks like a basic ball gown to me. I don't know. Cosmo, whoever wrote this article, we disagree. I'll call out one more. Sabrina Carpenter's look I was pretty pleased with because I felt like she still was sort of giving us that old Hollywood glam that she is clearly addicted to, but it does feel like she took it up a notch, made it again more interesting to look at with her headpiece, with the different like strips of fabric. It just took it up in a way that sometimes I feel like we don't see from Sabrina. It feels like she's not willing to take risks. She has her branding, she's the pinup doll, and we don't necessarily see her willing to walk away from that often. And here I felt like she gave us something more, which I appreciated. Ooh, and I just scrolled back down to Beyoncé. She takes the cake. Let me just say, the person who I alluded to that I wanted to talk through is Lauren Sanchez Bezos. Now, it should come as no surprise to any of you, particularly after we did an episode last season talking about her whack-ass wedding in Venice, that I don't care for this woman. I mean, I don't know her, but I find her to be ostentatious. I find Jeff Bezos to be just kind of like comical in how much of a villain he's become. Like he could end poverty in America, and instead he's increasing the price of Amazon Prime, ugh. And also, I just find their insistence on trying to make themselves relevant, like by basically buying out Vogue and buying out the Met Gala, to be so annoying. So to me, if you're going to be that ostentatious, that wealthy, that annoying about pushing yourself into these worlds, when you show up, give us something. She gave us nothing. I have seen people point out and do side-by-sides of her at other red carpet events. This is just the dress she wears. She always does this, super hourglass cutout, waist cinching look with her boobs hiked up and cleavage on display. She has worn this dress a million times. You fought and paid millions of dollars to get people to photograph you on these iconic steps. Why not wear an iconic outfit? You're going to wear this? Oh, it just screams like, I want so many people to notice me and to care about me. But now that they're noticing me and caring at least enough to photograph me, I don't know what to do because it turns out I'm not supposed to be here. And you're not. Please go away. Let the professionals handle this. There are people who literally work their whole lives to have this moment, to be included in an event of this magnitude. You showed up because your husband bought you a plate. And we don't care. We don't care. I really deeply dislike her. And the fact that she showed up in this nothing dress sent me to the moon. Okay. And I don't care if I sound like a hater. I am a hater. Okay. If Lauren Sanchez Bezos has no haters, I'm dead. All right, let's move on. I did say I wanted to touch on the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni of it all. If you hadn't heard the news, they finally, over a year later, decided to settle their lawsuit. I am reading from a CNN article titled Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni's Wayfarer Reach Settlement 2 weeks ahead of trial start. The article begins. The high-profile legal battle between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni's production company will no longer go to trial after the parties announced a settlement just 2 weeks before jury selection was slated to begin. Details of the settlement agreement were not immediately available. Lively filed a complaint alleging Baldoni sexually harassed her during the filming of It Ends With Us, which they co-starred in and Baldoni directed. Last month, a federal judge threw out 10 of the 13 claims in Lively's lawsuit, including sexual harassment and defamation, effectively narrowing the case. Some of the tossed claims, including the ones involving sexual harassment, were nixed due to legal technicalities, such as Lively being considered an independent contractor rather than an employee. I do think that's important to note. The remaining 3 claims, retaliation, aiding and abetting retaliation, and breach of contract, were not against Baldoni personally. His production company, Wayfarer, an LLC for the movie, and a public relations company retained by his team were the defendants in the remaining claims. Also not noted here, but important to note, before this judge tossed 10 of her 13 claims, Baldoni's entire lawsuit against her was dismissed. Okay, so most of the lawsuits from both of these parties had been dismissed by the time they were to get to trial. The trial really was going to deal with the claims of retaliation. Now, why am I bringing this up? To be honest with you, I think there is a lesson to be learned here for us, us plebeians, us non-Hollywood famous actors and celebrities. And it is a lesson I learned in business. It was my second year running Minted. Minted was founded in 2017. I learned this lesson in 2018. Okay. At the time, I was 32 years old, much younger than these two. No, I'm joking. That sounds rude. I don't know exactly how old they both are, but they're both older than 32. I know that. And I am surprised, very deeply surprised, that they did not learn this lesson earlier. And the lesson is this. It's one thing to be right and to know that you're right. It's another thing entirely to prove it and to pay to prove it. Sometimes it is not worth what it costs to be right. That is the lesson that I learned almost a decade ago. Sometimes it's not worth it to prove that you're right. What it will cost you in dollars, those being legal fees, because lawyers are expensive. What it will cost you in dollars, what it will cost you in grief, what it will cost you in your energy, and what it will cost you reputationally is not worth proving that you are right. And in this instance, I think the fact that all of Justin Baldoni's claims were thrown out, but not all of Blake's were, to me suggests at least the judge felt as though there was real merit in her claims. And I always said I felt like there was real merit in her claims, particularly the retaliation piece and the sexual harassment piece too. As this article states, that got thrown out because she wasn't an employee, not because the judge was saying there was no harassment to be spoken of. But I'm not trying to relitigate this. I'm simply trying to say, I think the lesson for us, again, those of us not Hollywood actors, is that sometimes even when you know you're right, it's not worth the fight. Because look at what Blake Lively has gone through to get here. And Baldoni too, because he was so dead set on, quote unquote, defending himself. Now, both of these people have been dragged through the mud. I haven't heard anyone say anything about wanting to work with either one of them. wanting to hire Wayfarer Studios, wanting to have Blake Lively lead a project. Like, and I'm not saying they won't get over it. I'm sure they will. But the grief, the reputational hit that you've taken, it just, to me, and everyone said this should have been settled long ago. Everybody said that, but they drug their heels so much, just like unwilling to let up. And only to settle it 2 weeks before it goes to trial. It's like, if you were going to settle it 2 weeks before it went to trial, you should have settled it a year and a half ago, truly, because all that's happened in between then and now is that you both look worse. You both have had your name dragged hither and thither for months and months and months on end. Could have squashed it months ago. And it is an ego thing to know that you are right and still put your sword down. Okay. In my case, I think I've spoken about this before, maybe on this show, I don't recall. In my case, and I can't say too much, NDAs were signed, but in my case, I had someone essentially threatening to sue me for breach of contract, a contract I did not breach. I did not breach. But in order to fight them, and I took it to my lawyer, and my lawyer said, listen, if we take this to court, you will win. You did not breach your contract. However, for us to get to court, you're going to be spending lots of money on legal bills. He's like, by the time you get to court and we get through the trial, you probably will have paid me, at least $15,000, potentially more, just to get to that point. And he was like, or you could pay her what she's asking for. And he's like, frankly, you're right. You shouldn't have to pay this to her, but it's going to be a lot cheaper than paying me. Okay. Ipso facto, I'm a logical person. I said, okay, let's do it. You got it, Jeff. His name was Jeff, my lawyer. You got it, Jeff. And so I paid her, not because I was wrong. I wasn't wrong, but because I did the math. It wasn't going to be worth the time, and it wasn't going to be worth the additional expense. So I paid her. I didn't want to, shouldn't have had to, but I did. And I guarantee every business owner, has had to do something like that. But this is a lesson you are supposed to learn early. It is not a lesson these two should be learning at this point in their careers. The fact that they let it go on this long is just kind of confusing. And I get that, like in my case, a breach of contract is different than sexual harassment. So there is just more tied up in it. And maybe that's why. And so maybe it was important for them and Blake particularly to see this all the way through. But to me, the lesson feels like, yeah, you endured far more heartbreak, far more grief, far more burden, far more reputational hit than you needed to. And your ego wouldn't let you walk away when you could have months ago. And since we're talking about business and we're talking about ego, I want to circle back to a topic that I brought up on social media, which is Bozoma Saint John. She is one of the housewives on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, the only Black housewife on Beverly Hills. There used to be two. Garcelle was there, but Garcelle left. And she is kind of in hot water right now because she sort of crashed out on social media over her own take and Andy Cohen's interpretation or understanding of her take. So if you missed it, to catch you up, first of all, who is Boz? Okay, so Boz is a very well-known marketer who has worked for a number of high-profile companies, including Netflix, including Uber, I believe. She worked for Pepsi for a long time. She worked for a lot of companies in a chief marketing officer capacity. And one of the things that got brought up during the reunion that was said about her was that she had a lot of short tenures at these places. And she did. I think she was like 18 to 24 months-ish at a number of these places. And she said at the reunion, the CMO role is a high turnover role. But the way she phrased it was, it's designed to be a high turnover role. And that is not accurate. However, it is accurate that it oftentimes is a high turnover role. This is what I discussed on social. But now she is sort of showing up online, and she's mad at Andy because Andy, during the reunion when she said that, was just sort of like, I don't know if that's right. And she's mad that he had that reaction. And I think she's mad because a lot of fans are sort of having a similar reaction to Andy, like, girl, what? That doesn't make sense. When she does know the truth of the matter, the fact of the matter is, relative to other C-suite roles, the CMO role does tend to be a high turnover role. Plenty of studies to support this, okay? You can Google them. Relative to other C-suite roles, it does tend to be a higher turnover role. And she knows that. She lived this. She was in corporate America for a long time, and she rose the ladder to hit these very, very successful roles. And so it's probably extremely frustrating to her that she knows more than a bunch of these goons on the internet commenting on it, but they're kind of making her look foolish about it. But again, when it comes to your ego is going to get you in so much more trouble. I have found, like, and I say this as someone whose ego has gotten her in trouble many a time. Okay. It's a lesson I'm still learning. But I think when it comes to Boz, she's crashing out on social media, and this is very much driven by ego, when you don't have to do all that because your resume speaks for itself. At the end of the day, these other girls sitting on these couches with you, I don't even know how many of them have a college degree. No shade to people who don't, but ma'am, you are so highly educated, so pedigreed. You have worked for everything you have. You don't have to always go toe to toe to prove how much you know, because you've got the resume. You've got it, And so, like, how much more do you risk? Again, how much more of a reputational risk do you take when every time an opportunity comes, you get in the mud with everybody else? You don't have to do that. And I actually think one of the things that really helped Boz in her first season was she was not always getting down in the mud with people. She sort of stayed above the fray. Now she's getting in the muck. And I think she's part of the reason she's having to get in the muck is because she's no longer one of two Black girls. Now the other ladies are going to pull her right in. I feel like first season, they were pulling Garcelle into the muck, and Boz got to sit above the fray. But you kind of helped usher Garcelle out, if we're being honest. And now you're sitting in that seat, and I think your ego is potentially getting the better of you. And I hate to see it because I like Boz. I don't think she's had a great second season, but I do think she is incredibly smart, incredibly insightful. I think she brings an element to the show that I enjoy, namely that she is Black. I think we need Black people on these shows. Otherwise, to me, it's just like less interesting watching white women be white women all the goddamn time. I'm sorry. It's not that interesting. Okay. We need some color. We need some diversity. So I'm happy she brings that. But I think she's got to just, like, remember who she is, because you are who you are. You are her. You need to remember that. Oh, I did say I wanted to touch on Olivia Rodrigo briefly, her SNL performance. I didn't watch all of her skits and sketches. I don't really watch SNL like that anymore, but I did watch her performances. And I will say the second single that she sang, Begged, that was a debut of another single off of her album, the name of which, y'all know I'm going to butcher it. Why did she name it this? It is so hard to remember. You seem pretty sad for a girl so in love. I think that's right. This is a single that we had not yet heard, and I will say I enjoyed it. I told you, to me, her sweet spot is an angsty ballad. Begged is an angsty ballad, and I love it. It's the same way I love, a super emotional ballad from Adele. Like, there are just certain artists, there's a thing you want from them, and when they deliver on it, it's very, very satisfying to me. That's Olivia Rodrigo with a nice angsty ballad. So I like Begged. If you haven't seen it, go check it out on YouTube. We'll include a link. It was just very nice, and she sounded fantastic. Her voice, to me, she's always had a strong voice, but I feel like I am hearing a lot of training. Like, she, in between album 2 and album 3, really went to the mattresses. Is that the phrase? I'm probably using that wrong. She really did the work. That's what it sounds like to me. She did some good, strong vocal work. Her high notes used to be a bit breathier. They're sounding much more supported. Her lung control, like breath control, is really stellar. She sounded great, and I enjoyed that song. So shout out to you, Olivia. And before we get out of here, I am going to bring back a segment from my earlier podcast called Judge and Jury, where, I tell you a situation and then I decide, was this a display of good or bad judgment? And what I want to talk about is returning to the Met Gala. I've seen a lot of people say celebrities should have boycotted the Met Gala because of Jeff Bezos, because he is, Temu Lex Luthor. That actress called him that. That actress from Abbott Elementary referred to him as Temu Lex Luthor, and I love it. And I will be referring to him as that from now on. Yes, Amazon treats its workers terribly. Amazon lies to consumers by jacking up prices and then having quote unquote Prime Day. We don't. When Minted has a Prime Day sale, it is actually 20% off. We don't raise our prices and then discount them. Okay. So if you're buying Minted on Amazon during Prime Day, you're getting a real discount. All right. Anyway, lies to consumers, raises prices constantly, terrible to their workers, supports Donald Trump. He is a terrible person, and he was the primary sponsor of Met Gala. So there are a lot of people who felt like celebrities should boycott the Met Gala. So judge and jury, all the celebrities who attended, was that good or bad judgment? And, I will just say, and this kind of gets back to a point I made on an earlier episode, I'm not willing to call it bad judgment. Like celebrities have a job to do. Part of their job is publicity. That might sound like a cop-out, but it is actually factually true. Part of your job as a celebrity is to maintain relevance, is to be popular. And so if you are invited to an event, because remember, this is invite only. You can't just show up to the Met Gala. If you are invited to an event like this that is going to have huge press coverage, is going to be covered by every press outlet practically in the world globally, and you say no, that is taking a hit. I'm not saying it's bad to say no. I'm just saying that's real calculus that you have to do. And so if it's part of your job and you make the decision to do that part of your job, I'm not going to call that bad judgment. I'm just not. I'm not willing to judge someone harshly for something that I'm pretty sure in their shoes I also would do. I think if I got invited to the Met Gala, particularly the Met Gala that Beyoncé was co-chairing, yeah, I'd be there. And I would just have to endure all the shit that y'all talked about me. And I would say, you know what? Heard, because I have said many a thing about Jeff Bezos, aka Temu Lex Luthor. And so for y'all to be calling me out on this, you're right. I really don't even think I would try to fight it. I'd be like, you're right. But it's Beyonce and it's the Met Gala. So here I am. I'm not willing to call it bad judgment, but I understand the people who are, and I'm not mad at them either. I think everyone has to figure out, what are your lines in the sand? What are your bright red lines that you are unwilling to cross? Only you can define that for you. I personally am not going to call it bad judgment for celebrities wanting to take some pictures and dress fashionably. I'm not going to call that bad judgment, but I get it to the people who are. And with that, we have made it to the end of yet another episode. Thank you for joining me. It's been a blast. I hope you had fun talking about the fashions, talking about the art, talking about Blake Lively. I'm joking. I know nobody wants to talk about that anymore. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you next time.